to a new video. This is JMR Art, and today I'm going to show you guys how I paint a portrait in gouache. Starting with my materials, I like to store my gouache in an airtight palette that keeps them from drying out, and also I mix my paint on the butcher tray. I also like to use a spray bottle to quickly have access to water, as well as a bucket of water off to the side. As usual, I start with a base layer of dilute gouache just to cover the paper and give myself a starting point. And blue was chosen as a complementary color to the oranges and browns that I know will be used later. After the first layer is completely dry, I like to do a value study with a slightly darker mixture of that blue paint. After which I move on to mixing a basic skin tone, starting with burnt sienna and Naples Yellow. And at this point, you can start to see the effect that blue base layer actually has. It makes the colors a little bit duller than they appear freshly mixed, which is one way to tone down the saturation. I also switched to a larger flat brush at this stage because I wanted to focus more on the larger shapes and not start getting into detail too early. Then I move on to building up the opacity a little bit more with white. I have two types of white in my palette, a zinc white and titanium white. Zinc is more transparent and good for mixing in your colors, while titanium white is more opaque and good for highlights. This stage of the process for me is all about just building up the layers, building up the amount of paint, and slowly working up to the colors that I'm seeing. My strategy when it comes to mixing color is to get a bunch of colors down on the palette and sort of mix what I see from there. And I don't mix all my colors ahead of time. I basically mix on the go, as you can see. I like to work this way because I think it adds spontaneity to my color choices and see color combinations that I may not think to mix ahead of time. So that's my main motivation for mixing on the go like this. It's time for one of my favorite aspects of using gouache, which is blending. Gouache can always be reactivated with water, which is one of its strengths or weaknesses depending on the situation. In this case, I'll be using it to my advantage in order to help me blend. Using a soft brush with clean water, I gently glazed over the surface to wet it. From there you can see that the paint becomes disturbed and it looks like I messed everything up. But it's actually not as bad as it looks. While the paint is still wet, you can add other colors using a wet into wet technique, and that helps them blend with smoother gradients. I like this part because it's like working with like melted butter. Everything just sort of settles down and blends nicely together once it dries. The key to this blending technique is using a light touch and not using too much water. Once it's dry, you can see that a lot of those hard edges are gone, but also a lot of it loses some of its brightness because the white is the main color that gets disturbed using that technique. So I just go back in and reapply some of the colors and also add back some of those edges that were lost to blending. When mixing colors with gouache, it's important to have plenty of paper towels nearby where you can control the amount of water in your brush. I'm constantly going back and forth, dabbing the brush on a paper towel in order to clean excess paint off the brush so that I don't contaminate the other wells, or just to get rid of excess water. I like to use a large flat brush when covering large areas like the background with a solid color. It helps me to get a flatter, more uniform wash because it holds more paint. At this point, I decide to throw down a thin wash of orange paint because I'm going to be painting this denim jacket that she's wearing. I found that by having that complementary color down, it helps me to paint denim and make it look a bit more realistic and not too blue, too much on the blue side. At this point, I move on to finishing up the details and sharpening some edges and lines. For the finer details, I like to use a small round brush. This one's a size 4, and it holds a nice point so that I can get those nice precise lines. For the final hair details, I basically just define different shapes. I don't go in and try to draw every single strand, just certain blocks to give it some definition and help it read a little better, but that's about it. And lastly, I like to add splatters of paint in order to simulate freckles or pores or to add texture to the skin. So overall, this was about 2 hours of painting and maybe another half an hour to draw the base sketch. And there you have it. That's the finished piece. This was actually a repaint of a study that I did back in 2017, around the time when I was just first starting to learn watercolor. Since then, I've moved on to gouache and further refined my style, and it's cool to look back and see the progress. And with that, we'll bring this video to a close. So until next time, I'll see you when I see you. I hope it's not too long. Just remember to fill those sketchbooks when I'm gone. Tap the notification bell to see new videos arrive. And if you like this one, please like and subscribe.